Okay, so this is the second section. It's going to first do a talk about supply demand talk about ivory. So here is a situation where we have a ban on ivory. This is cities, and what is cities? S under the cities treaty. I see cities, but anyway, it's a ban on ivory. So the cities ban on ivory eliminated legal markets in ivory. So the big thing here is it shifted demand to the left. Buyers cannot buy, and it also shifted supply to the left as well. Sellers cannot sell. So it's important to shift both supply and demand because that would bring down the price. And so if the decrease in demand is greater than that of supply, then the price indeed drops. Um, and a complete ban simplifies monitoring of any, because any ivory that's discovered is clearly illegal. Okay, so yeah, that's that would do the trick, but it needs to be international in nature, because like diamonds, it can be sold worldwide, and it's very difficult to determine where the ivory came from. So a complete ban is a very good thing and well. Um, Now in 1993, let's see, end result was an equilibrium. Kenya, for example, lost about 3,500 elephants to poachers each year before the ban, but only an estimated 50 elephants in 1993. The purported decrease in the market price for ivory from P0 to P1 suggests that the decrease in demand had a larger influence than the decrease in supply. So when you have two shifts like that, it depends upon the relative shift. In this case, demand was greater than supply, and thus the price indeed went down. Now, another policy is might involve dumping on the ivory market. Here, you would dump. A sudden increase in supply with no change in demand could indeed depress price, and that would make poaching less profitable. Now, the same thing, very curiously, happened in the diamond market compliments of De Beers. De Beers had definitely in the 80s and 90s a huge control of the diamond market. When somebody tried to go on its own, De Beers would crash the market or dump a lot of diamonds onto the market, crash the price, and it would make the selling of diamonds by anybody else very unprofitable indeed. So one could perhaps do this as well. Um, and yeah, there's an example of this. 1999, the Standing Committee of Cities, I still don't know what cities means, approved the commercial sale of nearly 60 tons of stockpiled ivory of, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Botswana to Japan. So supplies were closely monitored to prevent a flare up of poaching. So that could have definitely dropped the price considerably. Okay, next section is on greenhouse gases and the ozone layer. And here I think we have an example of the ozone layer over Antarctica. Now, what exactly is global warming? So it is substantial increases in the concentration of greenhouse gases since industrialization threaten to trap more heat in the atmosphere. This is global warming. What is ozone depletion? Um, ozone. Let's see. Ozone is a form of oxygen. The global concern is not so much ozone as a greenhouse gas or ground level pollutant, but the thinning and holes in the ozone layer that blankets the upper atmosphere and shields the Earth from harmful ultraviolet rays. Chlorofluorocarbons and related industrial gases have damaged the ozone layer in many places. And this photo shows the ozone layer. Um, now and so this gets to CFCs in the ozone layer. And there have indeed been international efforts to deal with CFCs and the ozone layer. Um, a British Antarctic survey team discovered the ozone hole in 1985, but is known to have existed since 1979. Um, and There have been um, various measurements, and then there was a Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, signed in 1987 and amended in 90 and 92. And that was a landmark agreement on CFC reductions, and it stipulated the phase out of CFC production. Um, CFCs can be difficult to monitor, but there has definitely been uh, good strides on dealing with the ozone hole. Now, international efforts to deal with global warming, however, there have been international agreements like the Kyoto Protocol in the 1997 and the Paris Agreement in the let's see in 2015. Unfortunately, our great country, the United States, was a notable exception, and Donald Trump has torn up the Paris Agreement. Um, it's difficult to enforce this as well, to decrease uh, global greenhouse gases. But there's been um, many initiatives, and the next chapter we'll talk a bit about them. You may have heard about them. I mentioned it in this course: the carbon tax, tradable emissions permits, and the like. And there have been international emissions trading initiatives. International Emissions Trading Association was created in 1999 to establish trading programs for greenhouse gases. So this is like a cap and trade type of scenario. Okay, next slide. Policies to deal with polluted seas. And this is certainly something that we see a lot of in Hawaii. And again, major problem is that this is an open access resource. This is tragedy of the commons. Those who are throwing away plastics and transporting oil do not internalize the full cost of these actions, not bearing the true social cost of the action. And there have been several international agreements on this. There's one called the Bond Agreement for Cooperation in Dealing with North Sea Pollution by Oil. And this was prompted by a spillage of 31 million gallons of oil from the Torrey Canyon in 1967. Under the Bond Agreement, participants agreed to share information on contingency plans for spills, alert each other for ongoing emergencies, and provide assistance to each other in the event of environmental disasters by sea. There's also the Oslo Convention for the Prevention of Marine Polluting by Dumping from Ships and Aircraft. This was in 1972. It was signed by 13 countries and established a commission to regulate and control the dumping of industrial waste. There was also the Paris Convention for the Prevention of Marine Pollution by Land-Based Sources, and this was in 1992. And these include a precautionary principle described in the reality check, which I think I'll be going into in the next slide. So the precautionary principle, it's often included in international environmental agreements. And very importantly, it says, where there are threats of serious environmental damage, full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing measures to prevent environmental degradation. And there, as likewise with the sustainability principle, There are certainly pros and cons to this that you can read about in your book here, but that this is a major addendum to most international environmental agreements. Okay, I think our final slide is called the mixed bag of tourism. There are definitely benefits and costs to tourism on the environment. Now measures of tourism effects, certainly tourism carrying capacity, involve estimates of the number of tourists that can visit an area before the environment would be substantially degraded. Limits of acceptable change on modification of the carrying capacity to focus on the level of tourism that best balances interests. Environmental impact assessments, we certainly have a lot of these in Hawaii. Impact studies perform the estimates of policies and development. And a tourism ecological footprint measures the broader demands of tourism on the environment. There are, benefits and costs. People go and visit areas to see the environment, and brings attention and notice, and perhaps money. Let's say to save chimpanzees or gorillas. But by the same token, there's also an impact of those same tourists on the place that they are themselves are visiting. Now, growing trends of ecotourism can perhaps have a smaller footprint than the mass tourism of the past. Culturally, environmentally sensitive tourism and voluntary payment for green energy offsets for the carbon footprint of tourism bode well for tourism with a smaller footprint than the mass tourism of the past. Okay, this ends our chapter 11, and that is International and Global Issues.